알아, 저 들린 쇼게. 줄이야. anything 개발제. anything 루틴 개발진 주요래. 아니 루틴 개발진 디텐이야. 나는 저기 남주 아와도 남주 비슷하게 남주 빈도 야구 쇼주요래서. 세상 되니기 된 개발진디 당한 저기 톱가와래. 깔래하고 레디 이네들 다들 안 줄이래. 톱되어래서. 세상 다 톱되어 유비갑되라. 저기 안디기 주야다 동아세계 탑람디게 냠렌치야디 아니 배준진 제고래 세지 어두스네 나이 아주 디리조에 디고시래.
Good afternoon. This morning we looked at this incredible human life that we have achieved, this life with such potential, this life that has the potential to transform the trajectory of our future lives. We also looked, though, that lives marked with the conditions that we have are incredibly rare and difficult to obtain. Not only that, they are easily lost.
아니네 나당하는 저기 루틴 개발진디 다 개호주 안에 즉 줍가와르지는 그 톱가와 인상 가르스네 유디 레라보 갈레하고 인상 규 근데 약보 주와티네 두고전 규디라티네 안디레 제산 규디가스네 주름송화된 두고 고래세지 안디레.
The reason that a life such as this is difficult to attain is because it requires many specific causes, and those causes themselves are difficult to accrue. Hence, the result of a life such as ours is difficult to attain. Reflecting on that, we'll strive to cultivate a mind that is ethical, a mind of ethical restraint, because it is the primary cause for good rebirth.
세상대지 뭐라는 게 쇼게 디와 개발에 규야보단 사약만 발가래라. 다유 수름 융아에서 예제되면 수름 소위게 수름 송화데 개발에 세상 개와 규 개와 사바인자 아니 규야보래 해서래. 당한 저기 둔주어다 되니기 개발에 규디 아니 가서는 미개와래 해서 미개와. 세상 규 미개와를 때는 ben 미개와라나 아주 공조랑제 신 심청 소주 신의 소주 치야다 신의 뇌바 차친기네 디바사지로와 되네 규미개와 내를 때네 아는 저기 만송라게 규디 차고래 세상 규야보세야디 규개와디 아니 야보체 개와디 가선 디제부 디기투 디기야다 류야보리고 그래서 개와디 규개와지 야보체 규미개와디다 규디하고 많이 받지 세상 가선 디제부 강아요다 동아 지게 개와리나 개와야 누가지 그 리고로 봐 디네자 미가 말했어. 지나 당한 저기 개와리에 규야가다 누가 가르서는 규야가데 개와 류가에서 예주된 비추림 송아디게 아니 규야가제 아니 지게 되자 콘도 녀모 봐 되게 아니 제 규두아데 자고래지.
사고가서 이네 거기 되어 에나 소스데 규야고래 이네 규데 나무가 키어버려야 가시 규야고데 그야고
수림 나눠래 저 디디 연구로 봐. 아니 디 연구래. 배는 저기 다니 류가 있으면 디버 균이 지금 매 선배게 삼로 디삼기 지금 삼다지 류가 있으면 예주 돈배 수림 송하나 디 지난 거 밀을래 규래 규야 다 딜에 규야가 가려서는 다 공로가 자주 쓰면 심지어 탐지게 된다라 심지어 탐지게 동아세야 다 디기 주비야 등에 심지어 탐지게 된다라 류가 있으니 주도 비추름 숨긴 시 삼바나 심지어 탐지게 된다 인삼배 송바 있나 디 추림디 니가 류가 있으니 주도 뭐 추림 송바 찍바래데 이내 공로가 될라 찍들 심지어 탐지게 되는 삼다와자 심지어 탐지게 된다 사예고 방토비 치도 삼다제 안 추림 송바 있나 디 규디 야가 제거래 가서 누버체 제거래 다케와치마 아니 원디고 고방 잠 토비 치도 아니 류가 있으니 주도 바 숨긴 삼바이나 규디 야고래데 이나 대지 심지어 탐지게 된도 삼다지 류가 있으니 주도 수는 송한테래 되스 되스 교하는 야잘마서 누버마서 중화 제거래.
Ethical restraint is a primary cause that leads to rebirth in an upper migration or a fortunate rebirth as a human or God. However, if the karmic imprint that propels the next rebirth isn't one of ethics, a virtuous imprint, but an imprint accumulated through non-virtue under the influence of afflictions, such as anger and attachment, that imprint will ripen in a rebirth in the lower realms, such as an animal. But then if we look at the quality of the particular imprint, taking, for example, that of ethics, in general, it is correct to say that ethics is the cause that will propel a good rebirth, as in the human or God realms. But there's wide variety within that. So the mere determination not to harm others through our physical behavior, our verbal communication, or way of thinking, that is ethical. That is ethics, and that is virtuous and creates the good imprints, the virtuous karma that leads to good rebirths. But for it to be, if it were of, let's say, a poor quality, that would all it be. That is all it would be. Just a mere wish. I won't harm others. Like that will create a virtuous karma, but of weak magnitude, because there lacks a sincerity and an honesty with oneself, a strength of mind. And if one were to make it somewhat stronger, there's a fear of falling to the lower realms, a determination not to close the possibility to fall into the lower realms and to create powerful causes so that one will achieve another good rebirth. That's a far stronger motivation behind one's ethics. So the ethics will be the same, the motivation is very different. Similarly, if one has a motivation that is primarily out of the concern for others, I will take care of my own mind so that it doesn't come under the influence of the afflictions, and thereby I do not harm others through my speech or my behavior, because I don't want others to suffer. That is a lot stronger, and an imprint of higher quality will be made. And if that imprint, with that motivation combined with the concern for others, is also combined with the thought of, not only do I not want to harm others, I want to be of the greatest benefit to others. By being unethical, not only will I harm others, but I will impede my spiritual development, which means I can be of less benefit to them. Therefore, I am determined to guard my mind so it doesn't come under the influence of the afflictions, because I do not want to harm others, nor do I want to impede my spiritual development, which prevents me from being of ever greater help to others. That is a far greater imprint, a far more powerful, a better quality imprint will be created. And then the last illustration will be, if one is guarding one's ethics with a motivation of bodhicitta, then with a motivation of bodhicitta, where one is determined to become a Buddha for the sake of others. So it's just like the previous illustration, just stronger. One will create an imprint, again, it's the same mind of ethics, but the quality of that mind is far greater. Now returning to the text. Thus far we've looked at a primary spiritual instruction to prepare for death, that of ethical restraint, and now we come to the second with the next verse on refuge. With confidence, rely on what is always non-deceptive, certain that the three jewels of the soul protecting refuge, unceasingly and with deep felt longing, go for refuge sincerely, day and night.
ane lote na namya milu wasa pa yishi kwa lote yishi chena sosol ya luwa gyuni me nodu gyuni me sosol ya de ben luwa sen disro de nganzu chi michilia rawal kya kyo tingi di chikchero cha sene ya sene gabriel ya ko ade ngi chigme sa da gabriel ya nga dusu chunga sa da anding chiki denege ko chi ko diluwa segirwa bene chik kyo roba chero che sa chen chu ko khelien be ne ande 어딘가 뒤직 뒤에 제라 마소세다 안딩이 제 투민도 세다 뒤는 루어 차이로 와 안에 양 고헐다야로 지 용구로 뒤 루어 차이로 와 그래서 당한 저 로데서 이제 제제 그 소소로 로 차상 파대베네 균이 루어 균이 매봐 먼저 로데바 나시 된다 말 로치 현디 수리에서는 겹건조 숨보 코나레에서 숨보 코나게 바래야지 숨고래
With confidence, rely on what is always non-deceptive, certain that the three jewels are the sole protecting refuge. So in order to eliminate suffering and its causes and attain happiness, a lasting, stable happiness, this is not something that we can do on our own or without influence and input from others. We are dependent on others in order to be able to eradicate suffering and attain happiness. And amongst the many others we are dependent on, we are primarily dependent on a guide, or primarily dependent on others who need to have particular qualities. In particular, they need to be trustworthy, they need to be reliable, they need to be non-deceptive. Such a guide is someone that we can rely on with confidence.
남부 산지 비기 만주기 겹세데 겹된 겹내세데 겹내데라 권초 숨세네 킬링거 권초 숨 킬링거래 진짜 권초 숨레 뉴나 안에 디고 말레스 안직 튕긴 직상거 말레스 다 권초 숨레 마와 지야 고야요 말레스 진짜 다 권초 가진다 권초 숨나라 뒤로 권초 숨나라 마뒤베기 권초 지야요 말레스 진짜 먼저 남부 산지 비되야 될이야 겹수 정도 다 겹수 줘야게 겹유세 먼저 겹수 줘 하나서라 줘야 겹수 줘고라 겹수 줘 유되랑 권초 같이 그래서 권초 숨요래서 권초 숨나라 뒤로 그래서 다 권초 숨샤고 남부 산지 비게
Buddhists go for refuge or to protection. So the term we translate as refuge can also be translated as protection. So in my translation, it's protecting refuge. Buddhists go for protecting refuge then to three jewels. And that enumeration of three is definite. It's not less than three, it's not more than three. It's the three jewels who are seen as trustworthy, non-deceptive and reliable that one turns to for protection or for refuge.
denege that manjugi jamro jedalia jedu manjugi nangbe pero karjosne member keba chikse danga daniel de konjo sumde mingarre sene that ko bene da sangye konjo chue konjo gendün gyatso so sum dire sangye konjo chue konjo gendün gyatso sade da namba sangye bi konjo sum 겹수 조색이 유디 겹유 건조 숨세야디 상계 건조 최 건조 기능 건조 세대 숨디기 시작하래.
Those who identify as Buddhists, they go for refuge to the three jewels. The three jewels are the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel.
지나다 니네 자다 숨들 가려서 상계 건조들라 겹된 법 어서라 겹된 법 가서네 겹 데네 동아 조야리아 람데네스 공고레 안디네데네 삼디네 땅을 디디어서 말로든 지경 가서 랍달 마서나 대틱시 틀음랍라 마서나 개인체 뭐나시죠 어디 가세레 가지 겹된 법 상계 건조들라 겹된 법 어서라.
The Buddha jewel refers to Buddha Shakyamuni, who's the founder teacher, the teacher who initially introduced the Buddha Dharma into our world. So he alone is the founder teacher, the Buddha jewel.
나 Gendün Gyatso 세디 가서래 캡든 버버 상이고치 다캡 최권조 세디 캡 원리디 최권조들이 해서 그러다 그래서 최권조 세디 고대나 남된서 그러 고대나는 아주 용모바 뻥비게 뻥바 고대서 디 고대지 디 뻥바디 가 용모바 매바 쇠바디 뻥 고대지 디 토바지 비게 람디 토비하게 탑람 람 고미야디 람된디 파부기 람들라 람된시 죄송하다 고된다 람된이 보들 최권조리 최권조서 그래 디 capmoinere 해서 capmoinere 디래서 그래서는 디 나눠 줄래 깨봐 있나 다 코발에 탈고 코발에 레단 요 코와 깨와지 제상 고된디 나눠 줄래 깨봐 고된다 람된이 줄래 깨봐 있나 나눠 줄래 깨봐 있나 capmoinere 가서 레서 되네 레단 요 코와 깨와들 탈고 그래서 디 탑람 땡현디 다 산지 권초도 cap된 법이죠 다 되니 capmoinere 나눠 줄래 줄래 깨래야 로봇체인데 먼저 냠는 집에 가면 양아도 롭된지 로봇체인데 아니 개념 건조들이 해서
The Dharma Jewel refers to the founder teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni. Sorry, that's the Buddha Jewel. The Dharma Jewel is the actual refuge. And again, here the synonym works better. The Dharma Jewel is our actual protection. And what the Dharma Jewel refers to is specifically true paths and true cessations. True cessations are attained when one abandons our afflictions, such as anger and attachment, completely, together with their seeds, so that they cannot ripen again. There is no seed to ripen into an affliction. That is a cessation. And the method or the mental path by which one achieves a true cessation is a true path. These exist in the continuum of an Arya being. An Arya being has in their continuum true paths and true cessations. Such a being has attained liberation from the sufferings of samsara. So therefore, the reason why the Dharma Jewel, true paths and true cessations, are called the actual refuge or the actual protection is when we turn to the Dharma Jewel for refuge or protection, we are turning to the Dharma because we know that by generating true paths and true cessations in our own continuum, when we actually manage to do so, we will have attained protection from suffering. Or to express that differently, we will have attained freedom or liberation from the sufferings of samsara. That is the actual refuge, the actual protection, our own mental development. Then the third jewel, the Sangha jewel, these are our companions in our progress of spiritual development, those who accompany us on our spiritual journey. They are our Sangha jewel.
다디 간주기 배가를 전에 순고를 배나가주기 산지 건조디 아주 멤버 캐바디다 지발에 해지래 디라 비자고래 다 간주 낮에 돼야 될래 멤버 캐바디기 아니 맨지 지고래 맨디네 사고래서 맨지 지고로 와지다 멤버 진짜 맨디 최권조디다 배든 지발에 가서 간주 맨디 사소나 맨디기 낮에 자고를 맞아 맨디 맞으나 자라 캐바지 요면에 자고 말와 진짜 자라 캐바디기 롭된 지긴데 자라 캐바 나신디 산지 건조서 캡된 법 보셔야 돼 맨디 나 최권조디다 지바 배든 레제 맨 간주기 내가 맨세야 로봇적인 지가 좀 맨셔봐 여러와도 롭종 맨비기 롭종 제시 맨셔봐 그런게 뒤스 맨 사탄한테 사고리 뒤스 뒤에 질라 사고라서 맞다도 제시 왔다 결혼 디사쇼 디시에서 다도 지금 맨셔봐디다 디 기든 거 줘디다 지발해지래 지산 전에 인자 아니 다 네바디 cap수 조한 되다 나와서 네바디다 나와서 cap수 조하디다 비되는 작용도 지산 나와서 cap수를 네바 조시나 다 캡술 네바디 네드 자고 거래 네드 자발라 멤버 캐바스 고거래 멤버 캐바드 메나 안 멘디 하고 다다 되두고 말아와 단 멤버 캐바요나 멘지 고거래 메나 멤버 캐바요나 나즈 자투야 갈래 하고 책으로 시대 멘 최권 전하지 멘디 고거래 다양직 맨디다 멤버 캐버 줘봐나 될 양지 맨저 냠도 네바디다 님 멤버 캐버디 야 네바 망고 따와서 가져갈 조건자 기디나 네바 님도 뒤에 락마 네바 찍님도 뒤에 락마와 제가 네바 찍님도 뒤에 파 뒤수 매세하다 바로 고쳐야 되지 맨샤 고고래 디 기딘 고쳐 찍바레스 제가 디 제가 대한 저기 산지 고쳐 추고쳐 기딘 고쳐 해야지 만주 미 네바 찍 배 네바 깔리 하고 지 약보지 잡아라 안될 가르고서 멤버 캐바 찍지 맨 약보 찍지 될 맨샤 약보 숨지 디 네바도 고고래스 제가 디나데 맨디 맨나야 찍마 차베나 네바 자두고 말에 맨 여바네 맨잡이 유네 멤버 캐바디 맨나 야 네들 맞아 간에 갔다 디야 하고도 말에 되네서 네바 약보 잡아라디 숨고바 나신 내가 저기 거기 동화 탐지를 세 아니 되기 땡이 되기 줘야 되라다 탈바다 탐지 기보고 뭐 토발라 다 사육 겹등에 사육군죠 겹모의 추군죠 되네 겹주배 다로 기된 거죠 안 숨도 고고래서지도 숨을
Well-known analogy to explain the three jewels as well as the purpose of refuge is we consider ourselves as like a patient who's suffering from illness. And as we know, when we are ill, we seek out protection from that suffering by going to a doctor, and we'll go to the most skilled doctor possible. So we are the patient. The skilled doctor is likened to the Buddha jewel. And this highly skilled doctor is able to precisely analyze the illness that the patient is suffering from, in this case, the illness of their afflicted minds, and prescribe the perfect, unmistaken medicine. And that medicine is likened to the Dharma Jewel. Then we've seen the doctor, who being highly skilled, there'll be a lot of demand for the doctor. We'll take our prescription and we'll rely on the doctor's staff, the Sangha Jewel, who can be likened to nursing staff, for example. And they will take that prescription and describe to us how we should take that medicine, how often, at what time of day, and so forth. And in this way, we can attain healing from our afflictions, protection from our afflictions. And we do so through relying on all three jewels: the skilled doctor, the medicine that is prescribed, as well as the nursing staff. In this way, we see that all three jewels are required. If one only has a doctor, but there is no medicine, one's not going to heal. Or if one has the medicine, but one is not being guided, perhaps one is alone at home trying to take the medicine, one is not going to achieve the desired result. So therefore, all three jewels are required. And that number of three is definite. And in this way, through relying on the three jewels, or going to refuge the three jewels, going to them for protection, we are able to generate the actual protection from suffering within us, the Dharma Jewel, the true cessations and true paths. So through relying on the three jewels, we generate the actual refuge, the realizations in our own continuum that gains us liberation from the sufferings of samsara.
Andine zada konjo sumchade sanje konjo chue konjo kidun konjo sumbodi da delya lote baina ane gis nganzo gida dunga se dan digi duye de da konjo sumbo del lote yiche bad ko yiche sem ding yiche che lote baina notrigune yo mares luwa yo mares name luwa yo mares notrigune yo mares che.
To achieve the desired result, what is required, as we've seen throughout the text, is we need to act with sincerity, genuinely, authentically. Here, turning to the three jewels, authentically trusting them. So with a sincerity arising from deep within, trusting them, knowing that they are non-deceptive, they will not deceive us, not take advantage of us, and the advice given, the prescription given, is perfect to eradicate us or free us from the suffering of the afflictions.
네네 ane 겹 건조 숨보 코나르게 겹 숨 코나르에스네 딜레 마와요 말레스 아니 딜레 뉴네 디요 말레스데 숨민치미 숨샤가레스지 코나르에스 디소르 당한저 당한 저 낭비게 숨이자 현대 내야 지미 겹 지부 건조 지크랑 샤요로 와드네 샤가 용거로 와지다 낭비게 되네 나 숨샤고 레지레.
The second line where it says So in our second line, it says that the three jewels are the soul protecting refuge. So this is what we have certainty in. All three jewels are the soul, the only protecting refuge. Other religions may assert just one jewel that one goes to for refuge. Here, it's all three, and that number is definite, not more, not less.
자다 숨보 코나는 얘기를 해야 되다 숨이 책임 말아 와서 망고 여러 와서서 용으로 앞에는 상계 망고 여러 겐둔 파베게 강사 망고 여러 내내 최고 고된다 남대 망고 여러 와서 숨이 책임이 나데 저 동자 망고 용으로 와서 약권조 숨이 책임 나타나서 망고 용으로 와서 용으로 와.
And this number is definite. One may well think, but hang on, there are innumerable Buddhas, innumerable Arya beings. How can one say there are only three when we know there are many more Buddhas and Arya beings?
지나다 겹권조 숨지대 상계 겹된바 상계 차상 겹된바 상계 권조세대 겹된바 나는 뒤르고 리사 상계 가지 유나 차상 겹된바 보세 상계 권조세대 직나 뒤직네 뒤네 샤올마데 상계 권조 나로려 직모도 매와 계시 말데 상계 권조 코로나로다 상계 망부요 이나다가 저 다가 상계 권조세 코로 대선 직 상계 권조세 지샤고 그 권조 직차들 이나 디나로 망고 최 권조세대 고대다 남대 망부요 이나 코로 최권조서 자산 최임의 직바치 직샤래. 대기도 파베에서 막보여 되는 기능 권조서 직 그래서 그런서 기도 직바인자. 저다 대선 직샤. 저다 대선 마서나 디나로 기능 권조 나라 막보여 되는 기능 권조서 직샤고 마도 장가스 막보샤고요 말이지. 재산 권조 숨 니에세 디레다서.
Whilst it is correct that there are innumerable Buddhas, they are all included within the Buddha jewel. Likewise, with true cessations and true paths, there are many cessations and true cessations and paths, but these are all condensed into or included within the Dharma Jewel. And so too with the Sangha Jewel, there are innumerable Arya beings, but they are all included as one in the Sangha Jewel.
인세 대매도 겹로 주에서 지사다 그디 이내도 그디 이내다 먼저 배셈 배슈 전부 근데 배 지게 야 권조 숨리야 동슈 잡고네 겹수 조고래서 배는 이 대두서 년고 님의 권을 쇼게다 님의 권이야 지 이나라 천하고네나 그디 이내다 먼저 고합을 해서 담질이야 그디네 셈리야 아니 권조 숨리야 겹로 제고래서 겹수 조고래서
Unceasingly and with deep felt longing, go for refuge sincerely, day and night. Here we see with the term unceasingly and day and night, here we're being encouraged that to take those moments, not just when we do our own formal practice, but throughout the day, to turn our mind to the Dharma, to turn our mind to all three jewels, and go for refuge.
동슈 잡고네서 배 지게 셈 숙첨부체네 당한 저게 다donda 겹수 조어서대 겹수 조어서대 가르치고 쓴다 안질렘 당아도 삼다제 당아도 지게 소소결라 되샤고 공로한 가자다 녀몽방아들 랑다신 차살이야 되네게 강아치 용도 제대 동아 먹고 여러 다 동아 될레데 타고도 선비게 될레데 마타나 탑민 타고도 선비게 삼로디 배지 숙첨부라시 삼다 다 타고도 선비 삼다이도 다 델레 동안 델레 교회의 뉴바의 수익교 그래서는 건조숨 교 그래서 베타 건조숨 겹 건조숨 버디 교 그래서 베게 샘딩기 이치셔야 되다 잠조셔야 돼. 동슈 자되다 대디지들 와데 베 Korwe dunga de but matanda tab minu sembe samda ta korwe dunga de gyön tonde dele de targodu sembe samje de ta dele pa tarage tablam de dum korwe dunga de gyoyo su gyoguresene ta gonjo sumbo digi gyogure sembe ge gonjo sumliya sem dingi da yijiya de.
To be able to go for refuge sincerely day and night with deep felt longing, this comes about through having reflected well on the faults of the afflictions. When one understands with vivid clarity that the mere arisal of the afflictions causes suffering, and certainly the expression of the afflictions causes suffering for others too, and suffering both in the immediate term and also through the accumulation of unvirtuous karma, suffering in life to come, we'll come to recognize that these afflictions are what cause us all our pain and misery. The source of our suffering is no person or event around us. It's our afflictions. And not only does it make us suffer, but through their expression again, causes pain for others too. We see this with genuine clarity. An aversion will arise to the afflictions, a fear for them. And we'll turn to the three jewels with sincerity for refuge, for protection, because we'll know that the three jewels have the capacity, are capable to protect us. So when we say they have the capacity to protect us, that protection comes through their guidance, and we ourselves applying ourselves to the guidance to generate the paths of the Dharma within ourselves.
아당 저기 잠도 제고래 세야되다 dire 잠녀 건조 숨세야되 산지 건조 최 건조 기둥 건조 숨보들이스 다디 당한주 동아들에 교야당 고리 동아 타자를 겹제 탈바다 탐제kim이 고바토에 탑람디 아니지 고외 동아를 파 교야지 수교 잠녀 건조 숨데 교고래 선배 셈 딩기 이시제야디 도스네 디 잠도세 다디 영한도 도천 셈 나올라야 야네 야도도 삼당고래제 다디 만족이 가서 디릭지에 직디레다 디릭지에 냠len지에 직디레.
So this preparation for the time of death, of going for refuge, what it means is reflecting again and again on the sufferings of samsara and that there is a path to gain freedom from the sufferings of samsara, and to actualize that path. So for it not to be a mere academic expression in a book, but to actualize it within our mind, means turning for refuge with sincerity, day and night, to the three jewels. Turning for refuge to them, knowing that through their guidance, we will generate the Dharma Jewel within us. Through receiving teachings, meditating on them, we will generate the actual jewel within ourselves. So reminding ourselves of these key points, the sufferings of samsara, that there is a path, and we will actualize that path by turning to the three jewels and generating the realizations within us. That is how we go for refuge. And this then is the second spiritual instruction in order to practice, in order to prepare for the time of death.
교비기 뉴바디 건조스미 겸 건조스미 교거래 세베게 이시제나 다 안에 이시제나 안에 가는 저기 안에 건조스미 간주야 동아디게 파 렌제 매바서야지 안에 가는 저기 디기디게 차사 안간주마 저게 최디마 여기서 고번알마 루제네 디기 두고래 베세네 니 말한 가지고 이시제 고르데 이시제네 안에 아주 가야 맞제 받지나 건조숨 디기 간주기야 안 지기 디기야 텐지 살바 탐지기 매 야고에서 해가요 말이지.
There's an important misunderstanding to avoid in refuge practice. So we've heard that going for genuine refuge depends on reflecting on the sufferings of samsara as well as the path to gain liberation from the sufferings of samsara. And then, in dependence on that, one will turn to the three jewels for refuge, for protection. So how is it then that protection is given to us? So the misunderstandings to avoid is to think that others can do the work for us, that those who are magnificent beings, the Buddhas and great Bodhisattvas, they can bestow their realizations upon us. That cannot be done. Nor can these great beings, with all their attainments and capacities, nor can they reach down and remove our suffering or remove our causes for suffering. This too cannot be done.
대다 상유점내 디기 송르와 조회 동아 차게 가서래 차게 메셀은 이도 바샬라 표면도 중요된 바디며 좋아 유세야 돼. 그래서 조회 동아 디기 안직바 저기 강발야 자로 참아 수분 블락베 뒤에지 바 뒤에는 바텔에 맨주지 마타여와 디나시 아주你这么东啊，牛毛别给他，对下空着俺家地经济现在刚刚来给东啊的个，俺那上一个嘛，下个都现在说对着还买了水去个要嘛的是，俺的那些，俺那上一可能给看别原点的，俺就给了马新把的牛毛卷的个，怕进原点马新把的个，俺那上一可能看别原点的出去俺就不是嘛，说那找到位呢，俺没给我妈看那么录这看了录这些找家教了哇。找到外面把是找家随便学了，的那些上一个看别原点的，俺做嘛录这些，俺做原点全部抢的虽然有个是那点有嘛的是，那上一个主要东啊些的地区主要的开始个是呢，个是去年电把电没做就是去用为你说的别电把你给南下把南顿读书结果的时候，南顿把那个人是。第二个节，安尼说是让给的上一个送把拿新节得了呀，年龄节怕说是个讲多些年龄节呢，真的东了做土个人，定义地区做土个人，我都送过了。
To understand what refuge is not as well as what it is, there's an important verse from Sutra to reflect on. The Buddha taught that I cannot wash away your suffering with water. I cannot remove your negativities with my hands. I cannot bestow my realizations upon you. The only way I can help is by teaching you and you striving for liberation. So this is a key verse to reflect on so as to overcome any misconception that others can do the work for us. That liberation from suffering is a gift that can be bestowed. The only gift that can be bestowed is the teachings. But even that is insufficient for us to actually transform our minds. Merely receiving teachings, of course, is greatly beneficial. Imprints are received. But one has to receive teachings again and again to deepen the imprints, and whilst doing so, reflect on their meaning, meditate on them. And as those teachings then become ever more integrated into our mind, we ensure that we live our life in accordance with those teachings. So all that work of receiving the teachings and listening well, reflecting on them, and then keeping them in mind throughout our activities, in other words, integrating them into our very being, this is up to us. This is up to us. No matter how great the Bodhisattva is, or even a Buddha, they cannot remove our suffering. They cannot bestow realizations upon us. This work we have to do ourselves.
어디 나신 다된 저게 야 안에 상계야 건조스래 bendes dunga de sanji konjusumi kyogure sebi 이지 제단데 간스리에스네 당한조 야 교구레세야 소소 강한 제 먹어체 안에 동아들이야 건조스미 교구레세비 이지 제단 말에 선 교구레세미 이지 제야도 가르겨서는 다 상지기 가소레 안줄야 동아 줘야게 탑람 람데 마노와 지금 저기 딱딱지 땡기레세비기 이시지 나 델이야 가서 냠는 집이가 gendün gyatso 되게 가서 로 따다 지기스 다 지기스 비시체 다 제바 디 제바라 때네 다 산지게 람든지 gendün gyatso 로바체네 소수게 람냠 냠는 제네 소수규라 람데나 고텐데 텐딘 지기리 깨바나 다 동알레 바 거기 동알레 야줘야기 람데 귀기 투그레 선비기다 이시티르다 이시티르와
From that verse, it should be clear that whilst we are entwined with others, dependent on others, we also are responsible for our own happiness. That responsibility rests with us. And to look further then at the meaning of refuge and relying with confidence or having trust or having faith in the three jewels, what that means is understanding the actual role of each of the three jewels. So understanding that the Buddha helps us even now by having presented the Dharma in this world, and the great beings, the Sangha jewels that followed, has kept it alive and living within the world through the development of it in their continuums. And that is what has kept it alive. So the Buddha has taught the complete and unmistaken path to liberation from suffering. And that complete and unmistaken path has been followed by the lineage of beings who have become Buddhas, who are now bodhisattvas and striving to become Buddhas. And this has kept the Dharma Jewel and the Sangha Jewel and the Buddha Jewel alive in the world. And it's for us to be guided by the Sangha Jewel in how to cultivate the complete and unmistaken path in our own continuum. And thereby, we'll give rise to the actual refuge, the actual protection, the Dharma Jewel within us, true paths and true cessations. And this is what we must have trust in. Trust in the three jewels. Trust in, and in particular, trust that through generating the minds of the Dharma within us, that is how we protect ourselves from suffering and will be of ever greater benefit to others as well.
나 가르스네 만주 건조스마 동안 건조스는 교그레 선배기 이시 대바 이시 제고레 대바 제고레스 안디 제와 김자 가르라나 겸르기 겸르 전에 겸르 랍자라간도 랍고 거래 겸르 랍자라 랍고 거래 겸르 랍자데 가르스네 다디 가사 셰바나시 룽아 이순이데 디바치교 말에 사자 샹라 녀바치교 말된 언주 차와치교 말에 샹라 차와치교 말에 사 근데 계획이 룽아 이순이네 계획 자와 강토도 주고 그래 사야지 랍자로 차고 지산디 랍자디 겸르 전에 랍자디 랍고 거래 랍자라 냠는 지고 거란서 지사다 산이 권주래 이지 맞으나 이지 때문에 맞으나 다 산이기 말랍자디 랍자티교디라 다디 지식이 디 제나 다다 용구이 내면나 가시 다제자 신의 이치메나 그딜 랍제만 랍제 제시게 될양 냠린 다다 지교 말하죠 이시마제반 지상한 좀 미질이야 지게 이시세라 맞으나 고엘랍교디 랍나 제라자 년어 지금 말와 다디 고가다 행유 지지가리나 아무것도 해야지 그 다다 이내면나 선배기 태솜사기로와 지상 산지 군주라 이시마제반 이치 땜부시 고그래 이치 디가르고선 산지기 안이야 람된 마노와 마초 따다지 난그래서 미치지 매바이나 안에 산이 손셔기 될이야 람 냠는 제를 듬바 숙청부지다 야고 제도고 말해지 제가 이치 제거를 김전디래 디나시 다 기능 건조라 이치로지 이치 땜부지면나 기능 거지 로제의 직진의 고다면 직진의 그 로고 시교의 따다 이나면나 선배기 삼로 형수와 디니시네 내가 따다 형투고 말지 이치 땜부지 고고래서 다 최고권제를 이시네 최고권제디 디네 코리아 동아리아 교구를 쓰기도 디 교구에 내면 나가시 디디 최고권제지 당하는 줄을 냠는 지네 디게原来면 나가시 선배 태숨 사와나 근데 내가 따다 양지 디 토요도 날에 배준지기 말해서 진짜 디네 인자 지금 Sanji is like Yishia, the Sanji Labjeldi, Manzu Yamlin Chevala, and say Yishi Timbuchkova and Yichi, Timbucheva, Yichiuna, and Dile Yamlin Chelia, Dumbal Mazo Shuk Cherke, Dumbi Patient, and Dinashin, Conjosum Yichiuna, the Nigian, Yichi Tone, Jamdug, Labjalia, Labialia, Dumban Shuk Cherke, the Zundu Shuk Cherkiana, the Uncodes, the Nezada, Manzudi. Yichi Hore said, Jumse, the Yichi Chevana, Delatine, Mahan to Capri Labjella, Labiadi, Dumba Shuk Cherata, Zundu Shuk Chelungur, Gaze Labje, Zundu Shuk Chetan, Yamlin Chevana, Mahan to Killa, Tobu Yunten Gawa, Jawati Juela, and Goa Tuyata, and Jimur to Tuyata, Ya Tanya and Yatra Chagorova.
It's important also not just to understand what is meant by the three jewels and what is meant by refuge, but also why faith in the three jewels is imperative. So this term in English, faith, has other connotations. So synonyms that may be more comfortable will be trust or confidence. So why is it imperative to have trust in the three jewels or confidence in the three jewels? Well, firstly, when one goes for refuge to the three jewels, this comes with certain commitments to engage in certain activity and commitments to refrain from other activities. And this, in brief, is the commitment not to harm. The commitment not to harm with our body, our speech, or mind. And secondly, the commitment to strive to accumulate virtue. So when one goes for refuge, it comes along with these commitments to accumulate virtue and to make effort in doing so, as well as to ensure that one does not harm others in any way. So if one identifies as a Buddhist, one goes for refuge to the three jewels. But the impact that the three jewels can have on one is determined not by whether one identifies as a Buddhist or accepts the three jewels, but is dependent on the sincerity with which one goes for refuge. It's a mere expression of words. We recite the refuge prayer, but it doesn't come from a place of sincerity. We may have all the external trappings of being a Buddhist, but the teachings of the Buddha, the three jewels themselves, will have very limited impact on us. If we lack faith, we won't apply ourselves to the teachings with sincerity. And why this is so important is because in order to attain liberation from the afflictions, which is our goal, we need to break so many long-standing habits of following these afflictions, of being influenced and guided by our afflictions. Or to express that differently, being guided by our habitual tendencies, pushing us in a certain direction. And it's only through having deep, heartfelt trust in the three jewels that we, one, will recognize these habitual tendencies and afflictions as they arise, and two, we'll recognize them as false, and three, we will have the strength of mind to wholeheartedly destroy them, overcome them, not be deceived by them. If our faith or our trust or conviction in the three jewels is weak, the Dharma will not readily arise in our mind. And if it does, and it's in contrast to an affliction, we'll readily allow ourselves to be deceived by that affliction or that habitual tendency and act as we've always done. And in this way, our mind will not change. But if our faith in the three jewels is sincere and heartfelt, we will keep a close watch on our mind, and whenever afflictions arise or habitual tendencies arise, we'll recognize them with ease because of the strength of our mindfulness, and with joy we'll apply our antidotes, we'll stand up to our afflictions. And this is how transformation will come, how transformation will come about rapidly. And in this way, I longed for, what did we have before? I longed for spiritual accomplishments, both the common and the supreme ones, will be rapidly achieved.
Lamdun dine dine kom jagore dine dine samdang budu sunsha yo dele dine da jige je sanyu chumne je su junge nyamlen chegen be ji mangbu jungro da mangbu tarba da tamji kimbe ko ba mangbu tozare ende ko luru la so ba da ji bende jubden la so ba da dine ge da kebe mangbu jung chasangi ji sanyu chumne dige lamdun je ba le dine lamdun ji di sumba na da haran 추신도 냠len cheji bejuji 냠len chene rodela anik 간즈지래 냠len chene 어디 똑같게 마선 세다 냠는 조야 균의 민도 세다 되네 균의 중요 말아 진짜 루아 매 봐서는 진짜 루아 때 되네 진 진짜 직 너를 아데네 냠는 제바인데디 따다리 레면 너를 레샤세지는 단 되네 게 중요 말아 봐 이제 대다 냠용 토네 진짜 밀루아리에서 루아요 말에서 진짜 상유 줌nen디게 마 람데 감다 뭐봐 tumbe 삼 랍체캬셔버도 소수게 냠는 제바이나 아니 인기된 건 저기 될야 로아체 루아요 말 되는게 또비 귤레게야 밀루아 루아며 봐 냠는 공고래 그래서 귤레 기기래 세대 두순 거래
To take refuge with sincerity, one needs to see the three jewels as non-deceptive. Seeing them as incontrovertible or non-deceptive, one will have the required trust that what we have yet to experience, we can experience. And that the technique for doing so is the technique that is presented. It is complete and it is unmistaken. If we have some doubt, then we'll want to have our own take on the teachings, our own interpretation of the technique. And that will serve as an impediment to our spiritual transformation. We recognize that the guidance from the three jewels, and the teachings in particular, are non-deceptive when we reflect that beings, since the time of the Buddha to now, have been applying these teachings, the same method, and achieving the same result. Because the objective of abandoning the afflictions is the same for all beings. We all have, whoever we are at whatever era or time, we've had anger and attachment. And it's through the non-deceptive three jewels that those are identified and eradicated. And many great beings of the past, from ancient India such as Nagarjuna and Chandakirti and so many others, have applied these teachings and have attained their results. And even in our world today, the Sangha jewel thrives. Those who have attained the great realizations on their continuum, they are the ones who are entrusted with continuing or keeping alive the Buddha Dharma and guiding ordinary suffering beings like ourselves to attain the same realizations that they have already attained.
Korweke rangana shen chasa danga zuke ganga da ne naza da denige semma kiwa da nyomo pe dunga kiye di dunga tada le drohege da gyabdi suchigirisin gyabne konjo sumgu digi chigiri sembeke sem dingi ishi chaya di da ishi chaya di nga zuke da gyamdwa seure chizang korwe dunga dele tago udu dele matane tab minuwas chizang korwe dunga le tago dele gyobe sui gyobe nubade sulu du labne gyabne konjo sumlu yore gyabne konjo sumgu gyobgore sembeke ishi chaya di da nga zuke gyamdwa seyaji di seure gyamdwa seore seyade di nga zuke di yane yangdo sam dango gore.
Going for refuge repeatedly or unceasingly with day and night means reflecting on the sufferings of samsara that torment us and all other ordinary beings and giving rise to a sincere yearning for liberation from suffering. And then turning to the three jewels for refuge, for protection, knowing that there is no other method than following the guidance of the three jewels and applying ourselves wholeheartedly. to the extent that we do this, we will progress towards attaining freedom. To the extent that we do not, we will remain helpless, lost in samsara. So this is what we need to recall again and again. In this way, we go for refuge.
바에게 탑람데 땡기레스 데데데 제고를 탑람데 땡고레스 다디 탑람데 소소라랑 저 냠는 제고레스 아저 냠는 제고 내려 로 수지가 가서 하 먹어와다 되니게 지 로고치는 수지에서 겐든 거죠 로고치기레스 겐든 거죠 로고치기레스 도 수지 냠는 겐든 거죠 로 상이에 손제 탑람 땡바든 가서 냠는 제도 겐든 거죠 로고치에 가서 도 냠는 제도 하는 가sam질이야 최고죠. 세야 고든다 람네세리 만스큐레 기고레스 기용레스 디기요도 랑귤로 토병도 하는 가지고 코에 동알이야 드에기 람디다 타야기 안도스는 고주고레 타고레스야지 타다다 겹도 코발레 겹탕데 되네세야지.
And how is it that the three jewels help us attain liberation from the sufferings of samsara? So the Buddha jewel has presented the path, has presented the Dharma. It is for us to cultivate the Dharma jewel within our own continuum, or to cultivate the path within our own continuum. This is up to us. And our companions to do this, to guide us on this unknown journey, is the Sangha jewel. The objective is for that Dharma jewel to generate it within our own continuum, to generate the true paths and true cessations. And in this way, freedom from suffering is achieved.
자, 나 남아산이 비기 최인 더디 지뒤셔는 남아산이 비 최대가 흘려는 다와 땡주다 저거 처음에 말해서 다와 땡주 땡내 주와 현지를 되는 주바 땡주 땡적인 남자서 땡주서 디서로 지상 현지를 다와 가르선 현지를 되는 주바마도 현강을 마셔봐랑 원의 주바서 요 말해서 다와지로 와당서 지상 가리나 최 가르신 현지를 되는 주고래 마도 현지라 마셔봐 랑원의 주태지 요 말해서 낭비게 다 현지를 되는 주고래 세대 다와르시 현지를 되고래서 다와르시 랑원에서 제가 랑원에 말하는 주다 지단시를 현실을 되는 주고래 되고래 변의 규단 뒤지 최대 규단 깨를 되는 주고래 뒤지게 최가래는 규단 깨질을 되는 주고마도 규단 깨를 마셔봐 주바지요 말해서 낭비 다와데 현실을 되는 주고래서 낭비 다와 차고래 죄바들라 처음에 지단 현례가 채와 뇌비게 자와지교 말해 채와지교 말해서 뇌비게 자와지교 말해서 술 뒤잖아 디날 두고래 채와매 봐 현례 뇌비게 채와매 대신에 류가 26가 뇌바지교 말해서 로아데 채와서는 현례 뇌바로 와서 현례 채와요 말 채와지교 말 세메기람 채와매 봐 제고래 채와매 봐 제고래 현례 채와지교 말해서 그래서 죄바디 류기 죄비 더니나 나기 죄비 더니나 심기 주변에 돈에 샬리아 내비게 체위기 자와지교 말에 에시아시다 하는 다와디 가르선 뒤주의 최근에시나 규단建了 되는 중국어래 세지 단낭비기 다와 땡주나 줘봐 체험해 봐야지 다도나 닝보를 주시나 다 낭비기 접수줘야 권조되려 권조 수묘래 산지 권조 최고지 계조 권조 수묘래 진짜 다 낭비게 다와 가르선은 다와 뭐 뒤지기 최담지 규단建了 되는 주바들이스 규라기는 마도바 좋아요 말해서 저바 가르서 류가 유스미 저바 차상 샬리아 처음에 채워지고 말해서 다디 낭배 최기 돈다 닝보를 뒤셔는 되네.
To describe what a Buddhist is, one needs to be able to describe the three jewels as we have done. Moreover, though, a Buddhist will also need to will ideally need to also understand the view and conduct of a Buddhist. So the view of Buddhism, in brief, can be called the presentation of dependent arising. Then the presentation of dependent arising is that everything arises dependently. Nothing is self-existent or independent. There's nothing that exists by way of its own essence or nature. Nothing exists in this way. Everything that exists comes about dependently. For example, changing phenomena, impermanent phenomena, are dependent on causes. There's not a single impermanent phenomenon that is independent or self-existent. All are dependent. That is, very brief, the view of Buddhism. The conduct of Buddhism is the commitment not to harm others. Not to harm others in any way. Not physically, not through our verbal communication, or even through thought. That is the conduct of Buddhism. The view is that of dependent arising. And Buddhists go to refuge, to the three jewels, as just described.
지게 참다 셰다 디네 차고네 당고 랍켄 야고 고고래 제가 랍켄 겐디 야고 실랍 겐디 야고 랍나 소소 랍나시 마제바이나 아니 겐기 롭죠 야고 요바나 가줄라 가주 자모고 제 추티시는 가주 개바차스 가요 말와 어디 나시제다 디네 인자 마 야골랍네 소수기 라바나신지 소수기 배제제 장 안디제 장에도 하는 가지고디 가세 가지고 내가 가려는 미유디 딜레투고로와 디나제 당가서 건조 산지 건조기디 셔 대시 셔바데 이시제 말롭된지도 배전지도 소수기디 냠는 제거라 디지네 네 건조 저 건조 규례기 투구리 해야돼 당가지고디 제가 산기디 바 인가도 내가 가려나 술럽된 지긴 기엔지 롭종 가려나 롭된 기엔지 야고 고고래 디기엔 야고 여반은 소소기 라바나신 콜 남든 제샤바데 소소 마자바나 야게 줘야 말와 이제다 디 나시 지바레시
The understanding of the three jewels actually can be understood too through our own everyday worldly experience, in that all of you have a wide variety of skills. Some of them you have in common, some are unique to you. But all of those skills came about in dependence on others. They weren't self-arisen, self-born with you. These were acquired in dependence on others. Everyone here is literate. You weren't born knowing English, knowing the alphabet, and how to read and write. You learned this in dependence on a teacher, and in dependence on your own imprints and the skill of the teacher, you learned quite easily or with some difficulty. So too throughout your schooling and your later education, as well as every other skill and talent you have in life. Whether it's, if you're good at a sport or a handicraft, these are things you learned. And you learned from someone who's skilled. But no matter how skilled any of those teachers were, you had to apply yourself. You had to listen, and then you had to practice. And the more you applied yourself, conjoined with the imprints that you have, the more skilled you are in that activity. So from this then, we can see in everyday life the role of the Buddha jewel and then the Dharma jewel. And likewise with the Sangha jewel, in our daily life we could consider, if it's a sport, our coach, or whatever other activities, our colleagues, those who are accompanying us. Perhaps it's when we're young, our parents, encouraging us. The key point to see here is the dependency we have on others, and that we have to make effort. The greater our effort, the greater the resulting skill. Moving to the next verse. Even slight, unwholesome karmic activity produces unbearable suffering in future lives. To abandon non-virtue and cultivate virtue right now it is necessary to strive from the depths of your heart.
나도나라 디가송스는 가서 디버세디 춘춘지나 지교 말에스 저나다 개와들 강투도 주부 그래서 거로바다.
The meaning in brief of this verse is, even slight non-virtue needs to be abandoned, not ignored. Moreover, we must apply ourselves solely to the accumulation of virtue.
저나다 레 미게 자와 참여 양스 세치만 나게 동하기 세되당한 저게 레 미게 외레 충충지 제외 있나야 니기 대부들라 개와 치마 양은 동하 용거야 동하 친구 용거야 자기를 해서 그러다 진짜 당하는 저 가서다 충충을 저 어디디 디고 친구이나 지금 나 충충을 했다 가요 말씀다 충충을 했으면 제샤바나 제에게 냥아요라 되네자다 디버세디 충충 첨부이나다 충충이나 가리나 지금 제 맞아야게 탑람 베지 제고래서 제가 레 미게와 충충 사바나 된 참모진 충충 사바나 니기 개와 치마들이야 안 나와서 동아 영역이 그 제부지기 동아기게 제부 동아기게 끼고 그래서
Look at the first two lines. Even slight, unwholesome karmic activity produces unbearable suffering in future lives. So here there's a common misconception that slight non-virtue doesn't really matter. And therefore, if I continue to act in this way, doesn't really matter. What we really are saying is, my wish for to do something is greater than I believe the suffering that will follow in a future life. This is mistaken. This is deeply mistaken.
지산다 미게 와세디 땅한 저기 대시 가상다 대쇼 셰바나지 지산 류가기 되네 변행하기 원에 직수다 아니 지금 주인시하다 담아지하다 근데서 지금 미게 와세고 그래 안 대한 굴롱 셴라 네베 삼바 고하다야 삼베톤의 시고로와 굴롱 디톤의 다연지 굴롱 기톤의 류규권의 셴리아 아니 지게 류규권의 셴기 고마고야 라서바다 셴리아 니롱다야다 내는 셴레 류르 뇌야라 뇌바제야 라서바다 안 지게 운도신의 셴 류규권의 미게와 류규가 미게와 다이 유권의 삼바나야 굴롱 삼바들야 셴 지게 tumbuyoba질 미tum버서야 샬야 체외 삼바 등이 콜야지 강한 제긴 선배 뇌고 쇠긴 삼바 뇌고 두부 땅인 선배 꾸노 되네게 삼바 체외 삼바다 누시네 네 삼나 땅바나 대소 미개와래 제가 미개와서 대소를 때냐가 저기 마오반의 대부 동화용하디 대소를 때니 리고래 제가 되네지 되죠 뒤네 지금 말했어야 돼 디바디게 뽕고래 에서스 디스모로
Just to re-express as translator a previous segment, I didn't say it so clearly. The misconception we may all too easily have is thinking that the pleasure from this minor activity is far greater than any minor results that will follow in a future life. That is a misunderstanding. What we need to become clear about is even small negativities can lead to great results. Earlier in the text, we heard the importance of ethics, of the commitment not to harm others. And thus, harming or benefiting of others is expressed either physically, verbally, and certainly from the motivating way of thinking. So one may think that, killing this particular life form doesn't really matter. Or stealing something like this doesn't really matter. And we can easily justify it. It's just a little insect, this is an object of not much value, and therefore do so. Or in terms of our speech, take advantage of others, deceive others, think, not a big deal. But this is a mistaken way to think. All forms of non-virtue, slight and great, need to be abandoned.
나면은 저기 나요권에 셴라베 직두자 주부시 셴라 뇌비기 직주부시라와이나 니기다 나기 딕바 내려드네 개와치마 동화 연구를 했어야 돼. 개와치마 동화 연마서 세다가라냐 뒤졌다가라 양아주 동화기 있기에 차고래. 아주 나요권에 미션다지라베 직두자 직집에 낙고시 라와이나 아니 디기 되버데 파조디기 양 아우슬야 되네 즉 두샤 지라병데 되네 셈 마키바 차용으로와 제가 되네 그 소소 파랍 되네 수레 제제 셈 마키바 안 되네 시도 아니 디파 저바드 파사스나 나우데디 샬 강바나도 되되베나 고용아 되네 라소 아베 두샤 되네 라소사 되네 삼마땅에 되네 셈 마키바 너 코르 게디나 삼다데 강아르 치고 제가 식수시에게 셈기 식수시에게 저기 다하나래 저기 강아 연구가 받은 아주 세부하고 두 개 차이로.
If we take as an illustration the verbal non-virtue of harsh speech. So we may think speaking to someone in a coarse or harsh manner is not particularly consequential. But such harsh speech comes from a motivating mind, accumulates a non-virtuous karma. That result is experienced in future lives. But even right now, in that moment, we are suffering from that arisal of that mind. And through the expression of this mind, perhaps of anger, to the other person, they get upset and may well respond in kind to us. So now, not only are we upset, but we are in conflict. We are in actual verbal conflict with someone else. So we're suffering in both ways. Our mind is disturbed from the rise or the affliction, and then through the expression, our suffering is compounded because the other person responds in kind. Then we go away from that situation, but we are physically somewhere else, but our mind is still there. And that situation plays in our mind. We repeat it again and again. Our mind stays stuck on that. Thinking about that awful person, what they said and did. I should have said this, I should have said that. The next time I see them, this is what I'm going to do. And like this, our suffering is perpetuated. And each of these moments of thought, we strengthen our habituation to this non-virtue.
Dine zada diche, da dine da dipong giru kewa tubala, ning samba tabe bebarik sideta anzuge da, and dine inza da dipase de pongurese, da dipong sen da dane, dipa pongya ke kotsugures pongures, dipa pongje, and the carjugos, Gava de Kaze Mantu to Tubures, Gava Chimbuina, the Chunjuina, the Chazan, Gantu to Tubures, Gava Tuburs.
And the verse continues, to abandon non-virtue and cultivate virtue right now is necessary to strive from the depths of your heart. So here we also see this expression right now, the sense of urgency, bearing in mind the text is advice, spiritual instructions for how to prepare for the end of this life. The end of this life which can come at any time. There is no certainty as to when it will come. Therefore, we need to commit to transforming ourselves right now.
다 개와 줍세야지 다 먼저 개와 줍야라 가르에서 다 간스 두고레시도 다 가상시에 류가 이순 요건에 챤라 뉘베자 지금에 선배 삼나다에도 디 다하랑 개화래 디 삼다 디 개와 두고래 디 삼나 가제 망하다나 개와 망하 두바래 어디 직시 한다데 대진열 셰바나지 안주기 마라다 챤 차상기 동화 타달래 동화디라 자고도 동화디 교벌 수교벌 capne kunjo sumge gyogre sembe 이시체네 이체 gyogre sembe samna taidi ta gyaware di ngans samna yane yan도 tambe taidi gyawa dugo kaze manga tabene gyawa ma dugo rechele da dinma diche anta anye dima sonsharido.
Already in our text we've had illustrations of how to accumulate virtue. The first that we heard was that of ethical restraint, where we make the commitment, I will not harm others. I will ensure that even in challenging circumstances, I do not physically act or verbally communicate in a way that brings harm to others. And I will try at all times to be mindful of my inner workings, my inner world, and ensure my mind doesn't come under the influence of afflictions and thereby give rise to harmful intent and other thoughts of harm. To the extent that one thinks this, virtue is created. Merely hearing these words here creates virtue. Reflecting on them again and again creates ever more virtue. And through doing this repeatedly, becomes ever more ingrained within us, deeper within us, and influences our daily life. And in this way, ever more virtues created from repeating this one thought. And the second advice we've received is that of refuge, thinking about the sufferings of samsara, how they come from our own afflictions, all the unwanted events, all the pain and misery that we experience, as well as all the physical illness and pain and mental suffering that others are experiencing, comes from affliction. Giving rise from this thought to the determination to gain freedom from sufferings, and to turn to the Dharma, cultivate the Dharma within one, because that is the complete and unmistaken path, and thereby going for refuge, that too is a virtuous thought. And generating refuge in this way, sincerely, day and night, this creates ever greater refuge, ever greater merit.
대지 당은 저기 디포 봉세도 령어 유심요 거네 안에 니바 지금에 심비 디바 되니게 삼다 되니지다 아주게 계획 자와 디한 개월다 되네 다중에 샬이야 팬백의 자와로 샬이야 지금 녀바 균에 지금 샬라면 녀바 샬이야 팬백의 자와 강토도 지긴 선배 삼로디 샬레 팬백 자와 강토도 지긴 선배 삼로디 개월에 지난 디가제 양내 양도 삼가제 삼 mga ta tu ne di kawa mga sa go je da chen le pemba jigin sambi sam na je dan ji diwa an buji ji ge chu na sa ba na ji zhong ne guo ning je da ko le ko xi zhe ko le pemba sam da je ya chu na due ya da ya diwa ji现在diwa pa zu milia ro che ya ka ri to ni na ya ji diwa ro che ya ka ri to ni ro ba che da ne现在팬배 삼군에 나지 로제바나 안지 상개월이 아니 건조리야 단지가 저기 최가도 지 건조선가 대바 제시도 제네 고라고라야 다 차세와라서 봐 지매도 부야라서 봐 내 부야라서 봐 사상 다 개월에 됐어 사상
With a sincere wish not to harm, this can easily be followed by this determination to benefit others. At the very least, one commits to not harming. And wherever one can, we commit to benefiting others. And with the greater sincerity of this determination to be of benefit to others, to ease their suffering. Because that first thought, I won't harm, is a commitment not to add to the burden of suffering of others. The second thought, I will benefit, this is the thought, I will ease their suffering burden. I will bring happiness and joy into their lives. To the extent we generate this thought, we create virtue. And then, to the extent we generate this thought, we will seek out opportunities. We'll notice them as they come by to help others. We'll walk past a small pond, or maybe even a puddle, and look, is there an insect in distress? And perhaps we'll have that opportunity to save a being who's in great terror. We may not be able to relate to it well, but it's thrashing about in that water, not wanting to die. Moreover, in our place of work, in our home, in going about in society, where we observe people are in need, we will readily, spontaneously offer ourselves to them, whether friends or strangers. And we will engage in more traditional religious activities, making offerings to the three jewels, circumambulation, prostration. Also because we want to transform ourselves. And in this process of transforming ourselves, ensure we don't bring harm to others. And wherever we can, we benefit others.
닝 삼바타베기 베바릭스도 다 삼바타반 닝네다 삼바타반스도 다 아직 대신일 셰바나제 어다데 지제도 제마디바제 제마지와제 어서면 좀 디멤바체 섬냐 람사 삼르냐 삼바타반 람사 근데 개어두베기 베스체고레 베고레 마도 안지 다데데 지금에다 제마디와제 제와서 베 삼단에 먼저 제야고 라마라 텐데 요마레 데자 셈딩네 안가 삼바타반 남사 안 계획이 다 되네겠어 계획 삼로 따야 돼 배수 최고래 해시래
In the final line in this verse, it is necessary to strive from the depths of your heart. So this line, the meaning of this line fits with every verse thus far. We do not have time. Don't delay. This incredible opportunity we have is about to end. Certainly our session is about to end, this retreat. Maybe we'll see the end of it. How much longer we have of this life, we do not know. There is no reason to delay. Train your mind now. Every opportunity, throughout our waking period, our mind is active and present. We have the opportunity to train. Do so. Don't delay. Don't procrastinate. Don't rely on the hope that things will get easier than now. Life less busy, health different from what it is. Use this opportunity. Make the most of what we have.
이상 당한 저기 팬베 삼라다 계획 삼라데 야네 야도 땅바네 또 진에야 계획 삼라데 땅바네 되네 계획 삼라데 슉셔셔로네 되네 지기 뇌베 삼바데 체외 삼바데 용용로네 마지야 근데 상계려야 상계려야 시한래 팬베 삼바지다 지기 제외 삼바시마도 지현래 체화제단 직현 다스 낭매샤 삼로 균여요 말다 가스는 두스는 삼로도 곰곰곰디지도 삼로 배차상 시현래 팬베심 용어 차 그디 내디게 차르고 디나신 안줄라 가스네 안조도 삼다베네 다다 안줄야 지다 팬베 삼로 세다 지 뉘베 삼로냐네 되스 가르네 뉘베 삼로 망알레 등에 서브직 자 팬베 삼로 용아래 안디파라들 야 지게 낭매 빠라래 바마샤야 될야 망무슈리고로 봐 지사 개회 삼로 자데 아니 팬베 삼로 되스 뉴뉴로 차고 지사 데스 직 삼로다 네 지금아주 저데 삼로 공원을 하려 이 현래 팬바 지긴 선배 삼다도 류가 요건에 현래 팬바도요 류 요건에 팬바가 거든 지수도 삼로데 야네 야도 팬바 삼로데 같이 삼단에 야데 슉셔셔셔 줘야다 아니 제마 안지 현래 뇌바라지 두아 노르르셔 뇌바 어당이 빼사셔디 노르니 뇌전 야고 중민도 와선 베게 람사 교비기야 리도 거래
We see here in the third line, we must abandon non-virtue and cultivate virtue right now. It's important to understand that there is a scale between virtue and non-virtue, wholesome thoughts and unwholesome thoughts. In that, when we quiet and we watch our mind, see what direction it naturally goes in, we see what we are habituated to, whether it's virtuous thoughts or afflictions. This is our current situation, and for each of us ourselves, we must become aware of this. So there's a habituation towards the one side or the other. Some thoughts are in the middle, equanimous thoughts, not necessarily, or those that are neither wholesome or unwholesome. But largely, our minds are either in the direction of virtue or the afflictions. But because there is really, we can approach this through the visual image of a scale, we can understand that if we increase the weight on one side of the scale, that alone has an impact on the other. So when our mind is particularly afflicted, a virtuous mind will arise with great difficulty. When our mind is virtuous, when, for example, love and compassion is very strong within us, an afflicted mind will arise with greater difficulty. And through the process of meditating, remembering its synonyms are habituation and familiarity, to becoming ever more habituated and familiar with virtuous minds. The contrary minds, the afflicted minds, naturally become weaker. As we become more loving and compassionate, the minds that were wanting harm to come to others will arise far less frequently, and when they do, will be much weaker. And because we've partially become estranged to minds of anger and harmful intent, we'll quickly notice their arisal, and immediately regret arises. That mind doesn't symbolize the person I want to be, and will readily, with ease, eliminate that affliction. And behind all our verbal communication and physical behavior, what is primary is a motivation. We've had the term here, sincerely, and terms like depths of your heart many times, because these allude to the motivation, not to be superficial in our practice, to look or act the right way, or speak in the right way, but to guard our mind and ensure our motivation is as pure and virtuous as possible. And in this way, through training well, we strengthen that side of the scale that is virtuous. And independence on that, the unwholesome side, the afflicted side, naturally weakens.
Drago Gores, Chesa Dungale Tashi, Tiki Yungo, Tingi Tiva the Gores, Tienzada, and the Dunga Tala Kibi, Nuba the Suliors, that Kemno Conjo Sumbo de Yores, Kemgochus Jubres and Begeda, Kemdolia, Ishichi, the Nigiche. Then Kemdoga Ishiche, Jubres and Bete, Kemdriga Labja Caresna, Sanjigi Labja Cardia Warsneda, Dibopon, Kio Drupsia the Sungores. Chisa dine zadangi lunga yisum yokone shenle nube chawa sa zawa gine chigme sembege ta surim samda chewe chigme sembe denege to komjade da du samda da de samda jene da lunga yisum shenle nube mi chewa zadangi shenle lunga yisum yokone shenle pembe chawa de gang tudu chiginya sembege pembe chawa karena je tudu chigins da dibose de zawa gine chunga isna 제목에 탑시당기 개와서데 즉 충주진의 주투에게 배수치기 선배다 내션리아 류가 유순유가 지샤라 내가 자오기네 지금에 지나다 류가 유순유가 내션리아 편배 자와로다 네 가가도 지인 선배게 도수지 삼다에 당 저게다 냠렌체데 디 롤바 도수지 장도르체 디르다 삼다에 대디 쇼게 삼다 아니무디와에 지네 내소수기 두수 간에질에 아직 고합라에나 두스네 야는 삼다도 내야워.
A way to include this in a daily meditation is when you wake up in the morning, remind yourself, myself and all other living beings are the same. There's no great difference between us. There are many superficial differences in terms of personality and our form, but beneath that, we all want to be happy. None of us wants to suffer. And how can one achieve this state, fulfill this wish, and achieve the state of lasting happiness? Well, it's only the three jewels have the power to provide us with protection. It's only through the guidance of the Sangha jewel, the example and the original teachings of the Buddha jewel, and the cultivation ourselves of the Dharma jewel within us, that freedom can be attained, protection from suffering. And what, in brief, is the advice from the Buddha? We see it in this verse. It was also in a verse in the praise to Buddha Shakyamuni we recite in morning class. Commit not a single non-virtuous action, perform only virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. This is it. It's very straightforward. Accumulate virtue, abandon non-virtue. And how to do so? Make two sincere commitments. I will restrain my mind. I will cultivate ethical restraint by restraining my mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions, and thereby I will restrain my physical and verbal behavior. And in this way, I'll bring no harm to others. I will not be a person who adds to the burden of suffering of others. And in fact, moreover, the second training, I will ease the suffering of others. Wherever I have the opportunity, I will help them. And I'll be of benefit to others, whether it's through physical behavior or through my speech. But primarily, at all times, I will take care of my mind, ensuring it is virtuous and not under the influence of the afflictions. And that thought that I've just mentioned in perhaps a minute is something I encourage you to think first thing in the morning and repeatedly throughout the day. It will take no longer than what I've said, and in fact, you may well, especially as you become familiar with it, be able to generate that determination in far less time. And if you do so repeatedly throughout the day, you will transform your life. So thank you. we'll complete here for today, and we'll continue tomorrow morning. Thank you.